The rhythm of healing, the octaves method. O is for observation, through stillness we find meditation and breath work that quiet the mind. In silence we listen, the answers are clear, awareness emerges, dissolving the fear. C is for compassion, for self and for all, embracing the good, the struggles, the fall. With kindness we grow, we nurture, we mend, learning to love ourselves as we extend. T is for therapy, a path we explore. Daily we practice unlocking the door. From journaling to mindfulness, healing begins. Each step is a victory as peace settles in. A is for animals and laughter so bright, like children at a play, their joy taking flight. With playfulness and movement, we rediscover the way to heal through the fun that we often delay. V is for victuals, nourishing and pure, detoxifying the body and keeping us sure. We choose what we eat with intention and grace, fueling our journey at our own pace. E is for exercise, where movement is free. We stretch and we bend in sweet harmony. Flexibility grows with choices we make. In strength and in stillness, our bodies awake. S is for socialize, where self-growth begins. Others reflect our triggers and the places within. Through relationships, our true selves we find, growing and healing with each tie that binds. The octaves method, where all behavior makes sense. We just need to find the sense it presents. We just need to find the sense it presents. We just need to find the sense it presents.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 5 of the Trauma and Social Work Podcast. I am KJ Alexander here with my co-host, Tanya Octave, and today we have a lot of important information to dive into. But before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and let Tanya tell a little bit more about herself and what this podcast is about.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Octave, and we are going into Season 5 of Trauma and Social Work Podcasts, where we will be discussing and diving deep into my book called Heal the Mind, 7 Strategies Towards Mental Wellness, Happiness, and Success, Exploring Trauma, Mental Wellness, and Ways to Live a More Balanced Life. And before we begin, just a simple reminder that this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended for medical, psychological, mental health, or legal advice. Although I'm a licensed professional, this is not a formal type of treatment. We may talk about things like hypnosis and meditation and things that we would do in a therapeutic, from a therapeutic perspective, but it's not a form of treatment. For individual questions about your wellness, your happiness, and your success, please seek out a professional. And if you are experiencing a mental health crisis, do call 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.
Great, awesome. That was amazing. So with that being said, I want to make sure I tell the audience, if you haven't already, follow this page on Spotify, YouTube, and any other platforms we post episodes on. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming episodes in the future. And with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. This is the Trauma and Social Work Podcast, and we're going to continue our discussion of the book, Heal Thy Mind. And we left off last time our discussion about emotional support animals. And I want to go ahead and read this section from the book, if I may. Mm-hmm. So in most states, a mental health professional can write letters for emotional support animals. ESA. A pet can be an emotional support to a human. ESAs are pets that often live with individuals, providing emotional support to humans. I look for certain demeanors when selecting an animal, and I observe the relationship between the owner and the animal. But specialized training is not required. The animal is simply there to help the person cope. Emotional support animals cannot travel without other approvals and do not get third party accommodation or other things covered under the American Disabilities Act. ESAs are domesticated animals such as dogs, cats, pigs, rabbits, guinea pigs, snakes, horses, and birds. The pets must be manageable outdoors and in public areas, and they must have a controllable demeanor. So even pigs are ESA animals. That's interesting. I didn't know that that was a thing. So,
Well, pigs are smarter than dogs,
oh really?
which astounds me as to why people want to eat them. But,
Yeah.
they're very intelligent animals. They call, they're responsive. You can train them tricks, all kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very interesting. So, I wonder with that if you can kind of elaborate a bit further and kind of explain, the benefits of having an emotional support animal and how can they contribute to someone's mental health in a positive way.
Okay. And so let's take a step backwards because usually all the questions I get is like, oh, can you do an ESA, emotional support animal letter? But then there's also this other category of a therapy animal and then another category of service animal. So let me talk about the difference so that I can offer some clarity for those who may
Okay.
know. An emotional support animal really is your companion, your sense of comfort. It provides an emotional stability to individuals experiencing mental health challenges like anxiety and depression and post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Unlike service animals, our ESAs are not required to undergo any specialized training or perform specific tasks. Instead, their primary role is really to offer that emotional support simply through their presence. A licensed mental health professional can prescribe an ESA letter or a recommendation for anybody receiving and would like to kind of have that support. So that's one category. Another category is a therapy animal, and they are really trained to provide, let's say, comfort and emotional support to that can be groups of people or individuals in all kinds of settings. I've seen them in hospitals and nursing homes, schools, in natural disasters. I've seen them at the airport, things where there may be heightened emotional states of anxiety. These animals do not belong to a specific individual for like their personal need, like an emotional support animal would be, but instead they're handled by a trained professional, someone who's licensed to learn how that communication from the animal, what that animal is saying in that what I would say in that therapeutic setting. And then there are the service animals, right? And this is really defined by the law under the Americans with Disability Act, also known as the ADA. And these are highly trained animals to perform these specific tasks directly related to a person's individual disability. And the task can include maybe guiding individuals with visual impairments, alerting individuals who might be deaf, and also detecting medical conditions such as seizures, low blood sugars, and providing mobility assistance to help them. And sometimes they'll do things like picking up things for the caregiver and then bringing them back if that's a need for that individual. Service animals essentially are for the handler, which is the individual, their daily functioning, and they have legal access to public areas such as restaurants, stores, public transportation. So your service animal goes anywhere with the individual because they're supporting the individual with their disability. And so I like to kind of just talk about the three different ones
Okay.
There are some legal protections. Service animals are protected under ADA, and so they can kind of have access to more places that an individual may go. Emotional support animals, they're usually covered under some housing laws like the Fair Housing Act. And in some cases, you can bring them with travel. However, if you're considering them for travel, make for sure you're checking with the airline and meeting all of their requirements because each airline is different and they may have some specific things in addition you need to do. And they cannot necessarily have automatic access to things that a service animal would. And a therapy animal usually doesn't have any legal protections, but they can be granted into facilities for therapeutic purposes. So if I were to bring my therapy dog with me, I can go into maybe an airport or a nursing home, things like that. And then all
Okay.
three of those categories have really different levels of training, with the exception of the emotional support animal. No training is required. Therapy animals go through a minimum amount of training, some basic skills and some advanced skills. And then your service animals are those who are usually trained the highest. And so
Okay.
you kind of asked in terms of emotional support animals, how can they be helpful?
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so when I think about emotional support animals and what they can do for the individual, they really can lower the individual stress and have them have these connections that maybe that can get them in a place, in a public place, if there's some anxiety there for them, so that they can reduce the stress of the individual. Sometimes, if you ever notice, just simply petting an animal or an animal sitting next to you is calming. It can really help an individual who's going through these stressors really kind of operate in the world more efficiently. This is not a cure. This is not a means of a sole treatment. Like this is just your only form of treatment, but it
Right.
can be used as an adjunctive thing. You might notice like people when they get very anxious, their cat may come and sit on their lap or like want to
Right.
do things with their paws to try to calm them and soothing them. And then dogs are great in terms of that. I haven't worked with other animals, but I know some information in terms of the other animals and the benefits that they can do in terms of providing just that support for someone.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, that was a great job basically breaking down and explaining what an emotional support animal is and who would be the right type of person to have to, look for this and really benefit from having one of these companions by their side. And there was a good distinction between emotional support animal and a service animal, which I think is important to make. So, so with all the many benefits of an emotional support animal, and you listed a few here in the book. So I'm gonna go ahead and read the first one because I found it interesting. So pets increase communication between the brain and body. Dopamine and neurochemicals can increase when pets are around. This raises one's capacity to love and show affection. In addition, pets increase the production of antibodies in the body, helping to improve immune function. And I found that very interesting. I wonder if you can kind of elaborate on the science or whatever research behind that and how these animals can help improve the body's health.
It just releases these wonderful hormones. And I think more specifically, most of my knowledge base is in work with therapy animals.
Okay.
And it releases that cortisone along with those other hormones that you shared, but it also increases toxin, oxytocin, which is
Okay.
that bonding hormone. That's the hormone that women, when they give birth, that's the hormone that's released in their body to help the attachment between the mom and the infant during that stage. But what a beautiful way if we can do that naturally. And so with when I'm working with an animal in terms of as a treatment with a particular individual, that's where we're looking. We're looking at releasing some of that
Okay.
oxytocin, if I'm saying it correctly, so that
Yeah.
it can stimulate that type of loving feeling for that individual as they're going through a healing process. I also find that there's just this calming presence that can ease in terms of anxiety and reducing symptoms of PTSD. I'll share some
Mm.
examples with my first therapy dog, who's now deceased. Her name was Summer, and she had an affinity to working with adults, particularly adults who were struggling with depression and anxiety. And what she would do whenever there was a new client coming in and there was a lot of kind of intense emotion, she would just go sit right on the lap or just sit her body all close to their body, and they may not have even have noticed it. And I'm just observing this, and in session I just see the person just rubbing her and rubbing her, and I can see the intensity of the emotion coming down. And so that would happen. And then when they came in for the next session, and over weeks and weeks, then what I started to notice, which was just so fascinating, is that she started to sit further away. And I was like, oh, this is an interesting process. Because then the clients, sometimes they wouldn't notice, or sometimes they'll say, Summer, come here. And then she'll come right back, right? And then she would go further and further away. And then there
Hmm.
would be these moments where she would sit by me. And I didn't rub her in session. She would just sit by me. And I said, okay. And then there were times she didn't even come into the room. She would stay out in the outside area. And when I made the parallel process, she was really demonstrating how the client's level of um, the way that they were manifesting their symptoms were decreasing. So at the onset of session, and this happened multiple times, at the onset of session, she was close because that's what the
Okay.
client needed. And the client had intense emotions. And as the client was working through whether it was anxiety or depression, and that was loosening, she would move further and further away because she was no longer needed. And then eventually she would be out of the room. And then I would make that as a conscious, I would bring that in as a conscious conversation with the patient to see how they can recognize their own progress. And so that was kind of like the beautiful story with that. And then with Mona, who's also a trained therapy dog, she just doesn't get any work because I'm no longer in person with people. I'm just online. But in person, she worked really, really well with kids. That was her niche. She was also a puppy up until about maybe 3 or 4 during the time of her work uh, at that time in person with individuals.
Okay.
And one of the things that I noticed with her is that kids would rub her, and they would rub her with anxiety, but her thing was a little bit more related to trauma and to sadness. And because she's a bigger dog, and because she's a little bit more furry and her fur is soft, uh, kids were attracted to that. So once they got done playing ball or doing kind of like other things in session, you would see this calming down. So Mona would sit down, and that was the time for them to rest. And so during that time, they would lay on her. She would allow it, and they would rub her. And that's when we would start to do some of the trauma work. And I would know then that that was a time that I could go a little bit more deeper in the treatment. And they would cry. They would look at her versus looking at me. And she would just kind of there. Sometimes she would lick the tears if, usually the kids were okay with that. That actually made them kind of grieve a little bit more depending on the circumstance. Um, But it was just a beautiful experience to use her in that way because she worked well with play in terms of how kids were integrated in their communication style. And so so therapy dogs can kind of be helpful because they're communicating, one, with their trainer, who is me, what is really going on in this behavior way with the client that they're also working on in a collaborative effort. And so I just find that there's so much beauty when you use therapy animals and you bring them into the setting, that it can really kind of help that individual sort out some things in navigating the process. Animals really serve to really bridge this human interaction, especially when we're
Mm,
struggling with things like anxiety and trauma and isolation. I've even seen emotional support animals be there for people who struggle with phobias or
mm,
social anxiety. They don't want to go anywhere, but they bring their pets with them to help them navigate conversations and interactions with other people. And so you will even see this thing mostly at like dog parks, because that's usually the setting where people can go with animals and bring them out. And then the adults can have a
yeah.
social interaction while watching the other dogs kind of play um, in this kind of contained environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those are all great points that you brought up. And I wanted to ask you about another benefit of emotional support animals that you added in the book. So I believe number 5, pets can be used as therapeutic tools to improve self esteem, set boundaries, and follow the rules, encouraging their owners to demonstrate patience, engage in healthy eating, and participate in outdoor activities and exercise.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think some of those are pretty obvious how emotional support animal can help a person. But I wonder if you would mind elaborating on how can a pet help someone engage in healthy eating and also be a tool to improve their self-esteem.
So, in terms of healthy eating, I think it's also important to kind of take a holistic perspective on what we think about pets and, what
Okay.
we're putting into our body, which I'm always going to say should be nutritious, should be foods that are detoxifying the body. And we'll get to all of that wonderful stuff when we talk about victuals. And then for our pets, we give them like canned foods, or we go to the dog store or the grocery store and we find what's on sale or what's good in terms of marketing. I'm gonna be like, I'm kind of a proponent of making our pets their own food. So I make meals every morning, or the food prepping is actually for my dog too. So when I'm making my bowl of vegetables or whatever I'm having for the day, she's actually eating the same vegetables minus some things. Like I don't give
Okay.
onions because there's certain things you can't. She doesn't get raisins. She doesn't get um, fresh garlic, although that might be a point of discussion to talk about. So for the
Okay.
most part, though, she gets. I will cook her meat. She only eats organic meats, and she'll have a variety just depending on what I can tolerate. And then she'll get an abundance of vegetables with that, because I want to make for sure that she's getting all the nutrients. And so, even when you think about prepping for your dog, this isn't you just wake up and find one or two recipes online. You really need to do some investigation to make for sure that they're getting all the nutrients. And you may need to add some additional supplements, especially if they're puppies, or especially if they're older, or if they're involved in like a high endurance sport activity. Their body is going to need things. So think about it, like our bodies need certain things if we're engaged in certain activities. When I'm weightlifting, I might need a little bit more protein. So I would have to consider that if she's getting ready to compete in some way, she might need a little bit more protein. And so she will have an abundance of vegetables with that. And yesterday I was making her, I think it was like some ground chicken with a whole bunch of vegetables. And I had cut up some of the ends of broccoli and I put it in there. So we have a routine that before she gets the meal, she kind of has to sit and be gentle with me. And then I give her the meal, and then she kind of starts eating. And then she sniffed one of the broccoli stems and kind of like threw it off the plate. And I picked it up and I threw it back on the plate. And I said, you better eat all your vegetables. And then I left and kind of went about my whatever I was doing in the morning and came back. And she ate everything, including all the stuff, the stem that I put back on there. So, like,
Oh,
that
wow.
is what we are supposed to be putting in their nutrition. When you look at the dog food and the ingredients that is giving from the market industry about how they're preparing dog food, this is not even for human consumption. And we wonder why the rates for animals in terms of cancer, their eye issues, they get all of the same diseases that we get because they're kind of on an American standard diet too, especially because if we're eating junk, we're giving them
Yeah.
our scrappings of junk too. And so it's also it's also contributing to a disease state for them. And we love our animals. So we should love ourselves and our bodies, and we should be doing that for our pets too. And they absolutely can engage in that. Every once in a while, she might get a starch like a brown rice, but that is typically not a part of her diet unless I'm doing something specific with that. Her diet is usually meat and vegetables, and she's very healthy in terms of how navigating that process for her. And so I say that to say, like, just don't wake up and go cook some food and then like get away from it without knowing anything. You really need to do some research, enroll in some online classes about healthy ways to cook for your dog. And there's some really kind of great organic people that you can follow and books that you can read to really give optimal nutrition and even supplements to add to their diet so that they're kind of going to be fully satisfied and their cells in their body is getting what they need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very important. And it's interesting you mentioned that, most animals end up suffering from the same conditions that their owners suffer from due to the fact the diet is pretty much the same. So yeah, I think it's great to add that if you're someone who wants to start having a more healthy diet, having an emotional support animal can help push you in that direction just simply because you may care about their diet more than yours, and you may start to have more attention to detail to what you feed your pet, and that may in turn help add more attention to detail to what you put in your own body. So I think that is a great reason to have an emotional support animal for sure.
And I
So
wanted to also address, because you said, how do you get animals to eat vegetables? I remember I was
yeah.
recording a video with Mona and Summer trying to eat a carrot that I had put some almond on it. And during the video, both of these dogs have ate almond and carrots. But now when I'm recording the video, they're not trying to do it. They're going in opposite directions until at some point I'm just like, forget it. I don't even want to record the video anymore. And I leave and I come back and all the apples, the carrots and the almond butter's gone.
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
oh, so you did eat it, right? And so that is also one technique in terms of, I always talk about nutrition. And when I'm working with kids, I'm talking about healthy ways to do it. One method that I did was getting Mona to eat healthy things that kids were giving her. So she was very accustomed to celery, very accustomed to carrots. And so it's like, there's 3 carrots. The kid eats one, Mona eats one, I eat one. There's 3 pieces of celery. Everybody eats one, right? And then we go along with that. And then now we've had this pattern where I'm talking, or actually in a nonverbal way, but demonstrating through behavior that we could all eat healthy versus us sitting down and eating chips and junk food. But that's how you can kind of encourage by teaching your pet. You can also teach kids, but you can also teach yourself. Because even when I'm preparing my salads or our meals, I'm thinking about, I know what my body needs, but what other kind of vegetable? I think I need a little bit more. Mona may need some Brussels sprouts. She might need some broccoli today, right? And so I'm going to cut up my portion of Brussels sprouts and broccoli, and then I'm going to give her the rest of it. And it's good for scraps too, because I don't throw away food. And so she gets a lot of those really healthier options of leftovers. Mhm.
Okay.
And your dog Debo loves my breakfast.
Yeah,
I did
absolutely.
record a video of him, and I want to say his play. And this was a dog who came to visit me, did it and spent the
Yeah.
night. And so all dogs that come with me, they get our breakfast in the morning time. And for him, I want to say maybe 1/4 was meat and 3/4 were vegetables. And he was like, oh my God, I've never had something so, I mean, he was just grumbling and grumbling. I had to like take the plate, like breathe a little bit. I know it's good, but come on now.
Yeah, no,
And he just
absolutely.
ate it all. So I think if animals and we can train animals to eat healthy, a part of it starts with us, the human parent, and making for sure that we're responsible. But just start kind of being, giving, you're trying little things out, like they really like snap peas. So maybe like just giving a little bit of snap peas with them. It's high in protein. And you might even break it up to where you just, these little things are essentially where you just give the pea, right? And if
Okay.
and if they won't eat it or spit it out, maybe put a little bit of almond butter on it or a little slice of like chicken around it and then give it to them, and then they'll start getting used to the taste, and then you don't necessarily need it. My dog's a little bit smart. Sometimes she'll spit, she won't eat the vegetables unless I put a little bit of meat on it.
Yeah,
So
right.
her and I have kind of gone back and forth about that.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. No,
Mhm.
I definitely would encourage more people to start, making their own dog food, especially in, addition to whatever they may be on already. So, yeah,
And you
absolutely.
even started, right, with Debo? What have you started
Yeah,
trying to do a
absolutely.
little bit at a time?
Yeah, so I would just add a little bit of cooked spinach to his dog
Mhm.
food just to get him some type of, vegetables in his diet, and he's been liking it, he doesn't really, sometimes he'll kind of avoid it at times, but
And you might have to put a little bit of extra chicken, a little bit of beef,
yeah.
or something else to try to mix in so he can have that scent, that smell to it, and then he'll kind of just gobble it up. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the rates of of obesity are definitely arising all over the world, particularly in the U.S. But the rates of obesity are also arising with our dogs. And we
Yeah.
have to say, like, I wonder why. Maybe, their natural diet is more of a meat because of their teeth and their digestive enzymes. So they should be having that type of protein into their diet. I'm not necessarily a proponent on trying to make my dog all vegan or like
Yeah.
vegetarian. But we cannot exclude vegetables. They need vegetables and they need an abundance of that along with whatever kind of organic meats that you add.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Wraps up another episode. I hope today's discussion provided clarity and tools you can use in your daily life. If you're ready to take the next step in the healing journey, I'd love to connect. Head over to my website to schedule a free 15-minute consultation. It is a great opportunity to ask questions and see how we can work together. And while you're there, download my complimentary workbook designed to help you reflect, grow, and move towards mental wellness, happiness, and success. Thanks for listening, and I will see you next time. The Rhythm of Healing, the Octaves Method. O is for observation, through stillness we find meditation and breath work that quiet the mind. In silence we listen, the answers are clear, awareness emerges, dissolving the fear. C is for compassion, for self and for all, embracing the good, the struggles, the fall. With kindness we grow, we nurture, we mend, learning to love ourselves as we extend. T is for therapy, a path we explore. Daily we practice unlocking the door. From journaling to mindfulness, healing begins. Each step is a victory as peace settles in. A is for animals and laughter so bright, like children at play, their joy taking flight. With playfulness and movement, we rediscover the way to heal through the fun that we often delay. V is for victuals, nourishing and pure, detoxifying the body and keeping us sure. We choose what we eat with intention and grace, fueling our journey at our own pace. E is for exercise, where movement is free. We stretch and we bend in sweet harmony. Flexibility grows with choices we make. In strength and in stillness, our bodies awake. S is for socialize, where self-growth begins. Others reflect our triggers and the places within. Through relationships, our true selves we find, growing and healing with each tie that binds. The octaves method, where all behavior makes sense. We just need to find the sense it presents. We just need to find the sense it presents. We just need to find the sense it presents.